And welcome everyone to Shitlord Preachers, episode 5. My name is Amos Joseph. I'm joined by Brook Potter in the UK.
What's happening, guys?
We are here today. For those of you who don't know, Brooke and I have known each other a few years. We're good friends, and basically we were both preachers, actually. And we basically on this podcast live stream we like to talk about different topics, mainly political, sometimes lifestyle kind of stuff, and just overall just we talk about the sort of breaking down the logic and the fallacies, I guess, that happen in day-to-day events, and how the media presents something versus how things actually are happening, and just some miscellaneous thoughts along the way. So we found that we have some pretty good discussions when it was just the two of us, and we thought, why not grace the internet with our discussions?
Is that what we're doing, man? We're just like,
we are gracing the internet with our awesome discussions.
I think that's a great way to put it. I think I like that.
A lot of the live stream formats we see is a lot of interviews, a lot of discussion as well, but just having straight discussion, sort of the candid capturing of these lively discussions Brooke and I have is pretty good as well. So this is Brook Potter over here. He's trying to adjust some lighting.
Hopefully not many people are seeing that. I hope not, but
oh no, we're no problem. So if you guys are wondering, I'll let Brooke explain why I'm in a t-shirt while Brooke is all dressed up.
Right, so for our watchers, welcome. It's always a pleasure. I mean, not a lot of people watch this live, but a lot of people do tend to follow up afterwards. As Amos has already pointed out, my name is Brook Potter. I am currently living in the UK, residing here from Trinidad and Tobago, even though some people don't believe I actually look like I'm from that country, but that's a whole other story. I didn't mean to outdress Amos. I do apologize. But the fact of the matter is I just came from a funeral. Of my girlfriend, her grandmother recently passed away, and I went out to support her and the family. And I knew I had the live stream. I mean, I've gotten through the door very shortly. I took off the black jacket and I put on the gray jacket just because the room is kind of hot, so it's a little cooler. But yeah, I'm not meaning to outshine Amos in any kind of capacity. It's not a rags to riches sort of thing going on here. It's just I didn't have the time really to change out of my clothes and stuff like that. I really wanted to get this done for you guys, the fans, the few of you that actually watch this thing, but I know the audience is growing, of which we appreciate. So yeah, thanks again for tuning in. I'm still adjusting the light. I'm not sure I like that very much. I'll see how it goes while Amos is talking, see if I can get something better, but that's where we're at, guys.
So we've kind of shifted our format in the past couple of streams here. Brooke and I used to do a lot of articles, kind of addressing the issues to kind of steer the direction of the podcast. Whereas right now we're feeling it's a better way to just have discussion without sort of the restrictions that these articles can kind of constrain us to. Feeling we just want to have plain discussion. We can carry on a discussion we had last week about something that we talked about, or just start anew with a new topic that we might feel is more relevant this week. For example, today we want to talk about Melania Trump's shoes.
Are we actually doing that? That would be a different direction for both of us.
Well, that's a part of it. Something that I kind of wanted to talk about too is the continuing denial that Antifa is a violent group.
Right. Yeah, the Antifa thing is serious. Yeah.
Some discussions that I've been having with people over Facebook, but just how the media is sort of presenting Antifa as sort of this frontline defense against the fascist Trump supporters of the U.S. One of the things that
has that been proven that every Trump supporter is a fascist out there? I mean, is that like
right?
Now?
Let's see. So every Trump supporter is a fascist. It's not every fascist could be a Trump supporter.
I thought it was what happened to the Nazis? Are the Nazis?
Well, okay. Nazis, fascists, KKK. They're all the same thing. Come on.
Right.
And and then anyone, and I mean, this is for me. It's kind of a personal thing. Is anyone who didn't vote for Hillary is a Trump supporter or Trump enabler. So they've the left has not only alienated Trump voters but also third party voters.
Right.
So any Jill Stein, Gary Johnson, other voters.
Yeah, the write-ins for Ron Paul and these guys.
Right. Because you know. Yeah.
That's crazy.
So basically, I was having this discussion yesterday, someone over Facebook where they posted an article from The Atlantic about how there is no equivalence in the Antifa and the white supremacists that were in Charlottesville a couple weeks ago.
Right.
And some people were coming in and discussing, saying, well, of course there's the same. I mean, Antifa is violent. From a lot of eyewitness accounts, people that were on the ground sort of seeing what's going on in Charlottesville, Antifa's thrown the first punch. Antifa in the past has shown plenty of history of just, they talk about how the right incites violence. But when you really look at it, Antifa doesn't even start with inciting. They just go right into violence.
Right.
Breaking windows, burning cars, throwing garbage cans, which is a common theme, surprisingly.
I mean, did you see that photo around the, I think it was just after Trump's inauguration, and they had the Women's March. And I mean, that was the first time I was exposed to Antifa. I don't know if you were following them before. And they basically wrecked a trash can. Like, they were running around the streets of Washington, and they just like totally kicked the shit out of a trash can.
Yeah, they're like kicking the shit out of trash cans. They're kicking at just it's
trash cans are fucking Nazi, man. I mean,
yeah. You've probably seen the video of the triggered woman at the college campus that like she throws a plastic garbage can and then like grabs her own stomach and just starts screaming like, "Oh!"
Yeah, I've seen that.
Yeah, trash cans are a thing for I don't know what. So I'm
just adjusting my light a little bit there. Is that better? Can you see me, Amos? I can
see it. I can see
okay,
it.
All right. Looking very tan.
So what's so yeah. Hey, it's a good thing.
It's an island thing.
So right. So this discussion went down where people were saying, hey, Antifa of course has violence. And then so the original poster basically said, well, of course, because Antifa exterminated those 6 million people way back when. And I was like,
wait. Say that again. Antifa,
of course, is 6 million people all that time ago. And I thought,
are they conflating the Nazis with the fascists?
They're like, well, because I mean that's the big thing is Nazis killed 6 million Jews, and that's just the Jews,
right?
Because there were many others. There were millions of others, gays, political opponents,
disabled,
communists, all these other people. So 6 million Jews was the worst of it. But I mean, so I just was kind of wondering, like really. Like you're really gonna you're walking right into this. So I said, well, of course not, because of course they didn't kill 6 million people way back when. Antifa, which has a history of being a communist movement,
right,
exterminated over 100 million people in the last century.
No. You have to clarify that point, right? They're associated with the anarcho-communists, which is different than let's say anarcho-capitalists and stuff like that. Right. So the ideology of communism is responsible for as much as 100 million. Some people say maybe 250 million people have died because of that ideology. So if she's conflating back to try and suggest that somehow, what was it? The Antifa was killing Jews. Was that the point?
Well, yeah, she was saying, well, of course, because Antifa killed all those Jews way back when. And it's like, well, we know they didn't kill all those Jews way back when. They just killed a whole bunch of other people way back then.
Right. And I mean, she's... I mean, this is ridiculous, but yeah, okay, so the fascists like Mussolini, right? Literally, and like Stalin and these guys, they did fight the Nazis, right? At one time, there was an alliance, and then they fought the Nazis, which is true, right?
Right.
But that
But I
didn't
mean,
last very long, right?
in the time of war, we pretty much took whatever we could get. I mean,
Yeah,
we
yeah. The
sided.
enemy of my enemy is their friend, right? Even
Right,
Russia,
right,
communist Russia was part of the Allied forces against the
right.
Nazi
Hmm.
regime, right? And once Nazism was eradicated, communism became the big enemy, right? So
Which
you
we
had the
were kind
Cold
of like,
War.
I mean, we were like, oh shit, the domino
Okay,
effect and everything.
so they're they're conflating this whole thing with
And then,
that's
of
good.
course, there was the video that of CNN, the CNN panel that went wrong. You sent me that.
I sent you that was so funny.
So
I mean,
CNN, if you guys just look up CNN Charlottesville panel gone wrong. Basically, what happened
we'll put the
was
link in the description
right,
after
right,
the
right.
stream. Yeah,
We took CNN brought on a bunch of Trump supporters, one of which was a black lady. So it's kind of like trying to get
I
there.
think there were two women of color. We don't say black anymore. We say people of color.
Oh, okay.
I think there were two. I mean, they only featured one, but yeah, go ahead.
Right, but they brought in basically they try to bring in a very multicultural, a diverse group of Trump supporters to kind of show, hey, we care, kind of. And they started interviewing them, like, so like, what do you think about this this thing that happened in Charlottesville? And they try to take them down this little path of here's this narrative we're going to try to get you to talk about. Now, here's the issue is I don't think they interviewed any of them before the panel. They were just like, hey, we got a diverse group of people. We're going to throw them on the panel. We're going to really get them. We're going to trap them in this narrative that we're trying to push that, Antifa are the good guys and the Nazis are the bad guys. And
I would love to know if that was true or not. I would love to know whoever the showrunner was or the production manager, if they interviewed those people before. Normally, they don't make that kind of mistake. They kind of
because the way
things in advance.
So the video basically goes on where pretty much everyone is saying, even this this lady of color is basically saying,
"It's all right, man.
No, black lady, just fucking with me." So basically, they're all kind of saying, "Well, from what we've heard, like Antifa threw the first punch. They threw the first, act of violence at us." And I mean, the whole thing got out of control, and they're basically saying, "Yeah, of course the neo-Nazi KKK white supremacist groups, of course they're bad, but Antifa is just as much his fault."
Correct.
So they're saying, well, wait, but this group is anti-fascist. How can they be like? How are you like? The lady is basically like, you can see she's short-circuiting in her brain, like, okay, I can't take this. Like the Antifa, like they're the good guys, like they're the ones against the Nazis, and then they're like, right, but they're also violent too.
Correct.
Which goes right back to what I've been saying is it doesn't matter what kind of ideology you have, good or bad. As soon as you throw a punch, you are wrong. Your whole movement is discredited. Your reputation, whatever you want to call it, the whole thing's done. You can't really come back from that. So, the media, the CNN was really trying to push this whole, well, they're anti, therefore they're on our side. And it's like, okay, so,
Yeah, I remember watching that panel, and I mean, it totally went wrong for the CNN anchor. I mean, I don't watch CNN. I don't even have a TV, actually. But I remember her really trying to equivocate the idea that you must have a good guy and a bad guy for there to be a fight. And one of the guys spoke up and said, "No, you don't make me choose between Hitler and Stalin, right? They're both, wrong in their own fashions, in their own light. And just because the enemy of my enemy happens to be my, ally or friend for the time being, once that third enemy is taken care of, you could go back to being enemies with your enemy, right?"
Right.
So yeah, I remember that interview, and I was really impressed with how knowledgeable the people were about the issues, which I think really speaks to the idea that people are no longer listening to the mainstream media, right? The CNN group thought they were on top of this issue, and they're clearly not, because even the black lady actually discussed that she'd seen videos on the ground of the whole Charlottesville incident on Facebook, people posting it on Facebook.
Yeah, and then even the anchor was like, "Well, you sure you're watching the right videos?" I mean,
Yeah,
starts to trying to discredit these people at every angle she can take, and they're like, "No, no, no, we watched the videos. We saw the right videos. Like, you're
correct.
you're you're not screwing with us on this. Like, we know what
Yeah,
we saw. We know the information we are gathering on our own. I mean, might as well just be saying like, you know, we can be informed without CNN."
exactly. And I mean, you could just see the poor woman's sparks flying out of her head as gears of her reality start to fall apart. But I wanted to make a point on that is that there was this one video that they showed trying to discredit the alt-right, which I don't think they need help doing that. I think the alt-right and the facets of that movement definitely have their issues, although we support them to do it. They want to do a peaceful protest and scream Nazi phrases, go right ahead. And they showed a video of the guys marching, which with the tiki torches, screaming "blood and soil," "they will not replace us," or something along those lines.
Right.
And there was a gentleman in the back of that panel who actually stood up and said, "Well, this was from the night before the incident at Charlottesville." And again, CNN is trying to paint that this was going on. This is what was being said to incite the violence from
Right.
Antifa.
The rally was like a couple days.
It was. And this was, I mean, the guy was knowledgeable. Like he was in the back. He's obviously been following what's going on from alternative media. And he knew that that march had taken place the night before all of the incidents that took place. So CNN trying to paint that story that, yeah, Antifa was incited by these words that they were saying was just fell apart completely. I thought that was brilliant.
Right. And which, yeah, this whole thing of inciting violence is just stupid because they're basically saying like, well, you're making me do this. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, with a lot of the mainstream media, just not just with Antifa and sort of, some of these things, they're talking about incitement. So they say like terrorism is sort of the U.S. intervention in Middle East nations that we are inciting terrorism. And then the right wing is inciting violence in these rallies. It's like everything is incitement, which always comes back to basically saying is, I think, it's trying to suppress free speech.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that
Yeah.
is the only facet of free speech that the United States Supreme Court has actually said, well, no, if you're encouraging people to act violently, that is not protected speech. But all this other
Right.
stuff, hate speech, nationalism, white racism, whatever it is, all of that is protected speech. So
Right.
people like I saw this guy on my Facebook feed. I mean, I know he's not, the most enlightened, and he put up this cartoon basically saying that the very act of holding up a flag that has the swastika, the Nazi swastika on it, is incitement, because you're holding up something that was basically symbolic of the death of the 6 billion plus how many of the Jews, disabled, homosexual, whatever, right? And you're holding up the symbol of that as some kind of indication that this is what you're going to do. And they tried to pull this whole narrative that just holding the flag, not even saying anything, was sufficient excuse to classify it as incitement.
Like this
And that,
flag here.
right, yeah, right. And which is, it's clearly not, right? It's clearly not. There are swastika flags hung in museums all around the world as a depiction of this as history, right? And if somebody wants to be foolish enough to go and fly one, that's their business. Like if you've ever watched the racial marches that take place in Japan. Like Japan has a very xenophobic movement. They're very much against foreigners coming in, Westerners coming in, even Koreans that are coming in. And they have actual anti-immigration marches where they fly Nazi paraphernalia and stuff like that. They basically say white man go home and pigs go home and all that kind of stuff. But they're not going to do anything violent, right? I mean, they're not about to start gassing the Koreans, right?
Jeez.
Um, or even I think in South Korea, there's actually a restaurant that is based on a gas chamber, right? Or some crazy Nazi themed kind of restaurant where they got all the paraphernalia around and stuff. And it's just a fucking gimmick, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, without context, and this is what the narrative on the left is completely devoid of context. They're trying to spin these narratives. And again, it's never as simple as just holding a flag or wearing a T-shirt, or a coincidence that okay, maybe this person is doing something similar. This unjustified equivocation between two things. So, like you wearing the Kekistani hat, which I personally see as a promotion of free speech, a mockery of all these fascist ideas and stuff like that. They're trying to justify that as some kind of white supremacist nonsense, when it is the antithesis of that.
Right.
And just because Richard Spencer did at one point put out a tweet about, free Kekistan, they failed to give the context that immediately after he did that, he was shot down by everybody who supported his movement, saying, no, you cannot get involved in this because this is actually mocking us.
Yeah.
I
saw something on the someone did a video quoting the Anti-Defamation League, talking about the OK symbol.
Oh, the OK symbol, right?
And milk.
It's white power, don't you see? Look, it's the W and the P or some shit. Oh, you got to do okay, right? So
something. So someone had done a video on it, and the right has obviously been joking about it, like really, like this is a white power symbol, and I think so. The video was talking about how like this was turned into a white power symbol, but then eventually the Anti-Defamation League, because they have to weigh in on it, basically said no, it's not. And
they got it right, did they?
Right, but then they turned it around, and they were this person who made the video then turned it back around and said, but see, even though the Anti-Defamation League is saying this is just a joke and this is not real, like this is not an actual thing, then you saw a bunch of actual racists, actual white supremacists doing it, then the concern is coming up again. Like, okay,
yeah, the equivalence is there. Yeah.
The equivalence is there now. So it's basically, I mean, it's like if today, if a bunch of, what was it, hippies always did the whole peace sign,
Yeah.
What if white supremacists did?
Yeah,
what if
Richard
Spencer
Nixon
did?
Or Richard Nixon did the peace sign as he's going off, right?
Yeah.
So they changed it to like that's victory, right? It's like
right. So here's the thing.
Oppressive
what if tomorrow?
Yeah.
The neo-Nazis did this.
Yeah. If suddenly it's
it's a racist symbol.
Exactly. That's the false equivalence.
Which shows, it's the false equivalence. It shows how easily symbols and figures and just logos can be so easily twisted and turned by the media and by the narrative that this was a joke. Now it's a Nazi thing.
Now it's a white supremacist.
This was okay. Now it's white power.
This kind of goes even further back. I don't know what the fuck is going on with your country, Amos. You're not keeping a lid on this stuff, but the whole thing with the Confederate flag and the Confederate history and all these different kinds of things, where you guys are tearing down monuments. This is stuff out of Stalin's playbook, right?
Right. Which actually, I think that could lead into another topic here, because the Confederate flag, like we talked about, it was, people talk about how it's about the Civil War. It represents slavery, when in reality there were it was a sign of rebellion. So then there were Confederate battle flags on tanks going into concentration camps.
Yeah. It's a free the Jews. And they had Confederate flags on the tanks. That's right.
Which was even more interesting because in Texas, with the flooding going on there were rescue boats with Confederate flags on them.
With Confederate flags. Correct.
And again, there were people that were at...
Yeah, it's that whole context thing, right? It's the left is devoid of context, and they think everything is objectively what they believe it is. When the collectivism on the whole is basically based on that flawed thinking. We as individualists will try to evaluate a person's character and what do they believe it means, right? Which is, ironically, we do that with art. We do that with a whole bunch of things. But for some reason, these extremist collectivist things can't think that way. If it is somebody's flying a Confederate flag and it's a show of rebellion against the state or whatever the case might be, they might have no racist indications at all. They might have no racist inclinations to that, in any kind of way. But again, now we're destroying monuments and all this other stuff in the name of, you know, purging history of racist. I don't know
I
what the
think there
fuck's
was
going on
something
anymore.
about how General Lee was actually. They said he was actually an anti-slavery. He was an abolitionist at some point, and he could have been just as easily been the general of the North.
Quite possibly. Quite possibly.
Yeah, the way it was they were just kind of grabbing at whatever generals they could, and he stood with the South, but he really wasn't. He wasn't even really like. I mean, you look at how much a lot of these players in the Civil War, how many of them were actual slave owners, actually pro-slavery, and you come down to the debate of not just, okay, is it really about slavery? No, it's really about states' rights. I saw something even. There's this YouTube channel I watched that examines history, and they talked about, okay, what would happen if the South, let's just say the South won the war, and we did have a Confederate States and a Union up north. Well, what would happen eventually was slavery would eventually be abolished either way.
Yeah, I believe that's the case.
Yeah, because to think that the South was just all about slavery is disingenuous, I think, at best. It's just, yes, slavery was bad, but it wasn't the entire issue.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. A lot of that actually has to do with mechanization and technology.
Right.
So, I mean, yeah, obviously I can't put myself or anybody into the mind of a slave owner, but actually housing and maintaining slaves and stuff like that was a very costly endeavor. And the advent of mechanization would have kind of done away with it. You could have done twice as much work with one guy and a tractor, at the end of the day, So yeah, you're right. Whether it would have kept on after that, I don't think it would have.
Right. So there was that, and but yeah, there were people on Twitter talking about how how they were trying to politicize and trying to turn it into a narrative when they heard about rescue boats with Confederate flags on them, and because in the midst of natural disaster, you got to politicize something still.
I don't know who the political strategist was. I think it was with the Clintons that they said, never let a disaster go to waste for your political gain.
Oh, geez.
So yeah, pretty much.
That's just gross. Like,
it's all spin, man. It's we in the UK we call it the Parliament of Fowls. I think George Orwell wrote Animal Farm.
Okay.
It was a kind of a mockery of that, but basically it's a circus, right? So the point of it was that it's not real. It's just smoke and mirrors, basically.
Mm-hmm.
So
so now we're going to move into talking about this hurricane and Melania's shoes.
I mean, of all the things the mainstream media can jump on.
Well, so for those of you who were watching, basically the Hurricane Harvey was like the worst, pretty much I think one of the worst storms, if not the worst storm in Texas's history that just hit them, and the flooding, Houston and Corpus Christi, there was a lot of flooding. And what had happened was, so Trump and Melania flew down to Texas.
President Trump.
Yep. President Trump and his wife, they flew down to Texas.
He was
wearing his I watched Ben Shapiro talk about this too. He was wearing, of course, his USA and then 45 on the side, being 45th president, wearing his hat. And he was all dressed up to go. She was wearing her FLOTUS hat, which we don't know why.
I didn't even know they had such a thing.
It's just, so she's wearing that, and she was wearing that in aviators. And as she was boarding Air Force One, the media caught that she was wearing high heels.
Air Force One or Marine One? Was she getting into a helicopter or a plane?
That was a plane.
Oh, okay, then it was Air Force
One. So she gets in, and she's wearing high heels. So of course the media has a field day. Like, why is she wearing high heels into a flooded area? Like, she's going into this rough area. Like, why? And so then they try to spin that. Then she gets there, walks out wearing tennis shoes.
Right. Oh, the
Sneakers.
humanity.
Yeah. So she's wearing sneakers, and everyone sees it. And they're like, okay, so she switches sneakers. And so Trump's there. He's speaking with the governor. All the while, no one, I don't think anyone's really reported on the fact that, according to a lot of the local sources, Trump mobilized resources to help with the situation quite quickly, actually.
I have heard something. I mean, I don't know the details, but I've heard the same thing, that, he was very quick to respond. He had, I think, the National Guard and everything on the standby.
FEMA made a statement on the news basis. They were like, how is it going over there? And he says, well, we're going to be here. They're like, well, you're probably going to be there for a few months. And they said, no, we're going to be here a couple years. Basically, they're like, we're going to get the job done. We're going to be here until this is resolved, because this is pretty bad.
Right.
So everything was mobilized pretty quickly, for all intensive purposes. Basically, Trump got things going right away, and the media hasn't really talked about that. So what does the media talk about? Melania's shoes. They talked about he had a rally with some people where he was, we got to understand the fact that Trump is a narcissist. Trump is all about crowds. Trump is all about the people, like just having lots of people at rallies. So
Correct.
What is he doing at this rally? What a crowd, what a group. You guys are awesome. Thank you all for coming. That's what he's doing. Now,
yeah, it's a Trump rally. I mean,
as much as we don't like that aspect of him, that's who he is. There's no actual harm to that, I think. Is it a little bit, insensitive? Does it seem a little like he doesn't care? It could, but that's just how he is.
I mean, to be fair with that, even Obama did rallies, and he would like openly mock the Republicans. What was the thing about? Oh gosh, there was something that he said, and there was a serious issue being debated in the House and stuff like that, and he just made like some kind of crack, like like the Republicans couldn't handle Twitter, or they couldn't handle the debate, when the debates were going on and stuff like that, and they're saying like they couldn't handle a couple of questions and stuff. So I mean, presidents do that. They all do their rallies, they do their town halls and stuff like that. They go out to support candidates. That's nothing new, that's not really.
But everyone is
really
forces. I mean, forget that Trump mobilized the resources fairly quick. Forget that the situation is being dealt with head on. Forget all that. He's not empathetic. He didn't actually, come down and actually there wasn't any footage of Trump, bailing sandbags. There was no footage of him feeding the hungry. He was just, we get that's.
He couldn't even get in there. The area's flooded. I mean,
right. Then he's not actually getting in there and showing like he's a man of the people. It's like, well, I get where they're coming from, but I mean, what was it? Ben Shapiro's, one of his people edited out a nice clip of just basically they kept using the word empathy. Oh, he's not empathetic. He's not empathetic. He's not empathetic. I don't know. Like, how could you say he's not empathetic when he responded so quickly to everything?
Yeah, correct.
Well, he's not empathetic because he's not showing emotion. He's not shedding a tear. He's not actually bailing the sandbags. He's not actually,
handing out blankets and kissing babies and all this other crap.
But hey, Melania's shoes. Better remember.
I noticed how quickly the Russia thing disappeared on all this talk, all about Melania's shoes. The minute she makes a fashion statement, Russians are no longer important.
Right. Oh, wait. Did you also hear that North Korea launched a missile?
Yeah. Over Japan. But no, Melania's shoes, man.
Right.
For fuck's sake. I mean, we have a mutual friend. I mean, there was the big controversy that came out of the hurricane situation, which is not even, it's less than a nothing statement, is the whole Joel Osteen's church apparently not being open to the public.
So those of you who maybe don't know or do know, Joel Osteen I think it's the largest church in the States, I think at least it is.
Okay, maybe.
He's
Yeah,
got the
probably.
he's got the old stadium in Houston, I think. Lakewood, is it Lakewood Church?
Yeah, Lakewood Church. That's it.
Yep. 12,000 person stadium. That's the church. And very, very large. The dude has like a $10 million mansion. Um, Anyways, so there was this whole controversy because he, being such a large church, such a large arena, did not open their doors. So there was talk. So I'm going to kind of present the different
Yeah,
angles that I
summarize it. Yeah.
heard. So the flood happens. Um, People start flooding at their doors saying, "Hey, let us in. We need shelter." They said they can't because the city didn't ask them or something. I don't know what was about that angle there. Then there was something about that there was actual flooding in the church, therefore they couldn't. It wouldn't do them any good.
Yeah, that's what I heard also.
But then they turned it around, and eventually, because of the pressure from the social media over that first day that this was becoming a thing, the church opened their doors, but they said in a statement, they claimed, no, this is not the case. We didn't just open because of social media pressures. There's even a couple of clips I saw where people were recording on the outside and saying, oh, look at all this flooding. They were looking at certain parts of the building that didn't have flooding, whereas the church actually posted some photos of where there was flooding. So
yeah,
I don't
I
really
saw the
know.
photographs of that thing. Yeah.
So they basically started, thinking, well, it's a church, they're not being compassionate. Joel Osteen, it's all on Joel Osteen now. And then I think he even turned it in. He was interviewed on the news. I hadn't seen that clip yet, where he was actually interviewed, and so and of course, so on one end you have the political part of it. You have the empathy. You have the Melania shoes. You have all this other stuff. And some of our friends who are, sort of more in the Christian circles are essentially, I don't know, would you call it religious politicizing or making it
they're making a shitstorm out of it.
They're making a narrative. They're trying to spin this narrative about sort of, Joel Osteen is not compassionate. He's not a good guy. Christianity sucks. Churches, well, I shouldn't say Christianity. Churches suck. The institutionalized side of religion is just a bunch of bullshit because of this whole thing. And I kind of just go, there's so many more important things we could be talking about.
That's not really helpful. At the end of the day, I just saw one, like before we got into the stream, somebody actually you and I both know, she posted, there's a meme going around basically about, there's so many churches within Houston and only like 4% out of all of these churches actually open their doors. Right. Have you seen that meme?
Yeah, I saw. I know who you're talking about.
Right. And I've seen the rebuttal to that. Right. There's, I think one of these Occupy Wall Street logic groups actually said, well, most of these places are flooded, right? The city is flooded, right? So, of all the ones that actually can open, those ones are probably the ones that did, but again, context is completely lost on these people. They can't even, the fucking city is underwater.
The narrative is churches suck.
Right. But again, that's not even an accurate representation. And even to be fair, just to be fair, most of those churches are probably very small. They don't have facilities to like accommodate like showers and all these other kinds of things. Right. And some of them are probably literally underwater. So again,
the population of, by the way, sorry, real quick, the population of Houston is 2.3 million people. Right. Joel Osteen Stadium can hold 12,000 people. Let's just say he bumped it up to 15, maybe even 20,000 for holding people. You think that really is going to make that big of a difference? I mean, he's one church. Definitely, he's the big church. But I kind of go, well,
yeah. In the grand scheme of things, and again, it's a church. It's not really equipped to handle, like a refugee situation or like, an emergency situation, right?
Right.
But not to give him a pass, right? He should, of course, do everything that he can. I don't
definitely.
Yeah, I don't like this singling out of him in this particular scenario because, again, the person who started this whole thing, they had no idea what state the church was in. And like you said, there were areas that were flooded, and apparently there was like a foot between the floodwaters and basically overflowing into the main sanctuary. So I mean, again, it's a safety hazard. At the end of the day, it didn't appear to be safe.
Right, and I look at it this way. Oh, go ahead.
No, finish. Go ahead.
So the media likes, like, I was just thinking, I'd like for one day, just one day, or even just a few minutes, the media actually puts out some good news, because here they are, they're talking about, I mean, there's this really big disaster going on. And they're completely denying, they're denying the fact that Trump mobilized resources so quickly as he did, that the people that are there, FEMA, the National Guard, a lot of these relief efforts are actually, they've dug their feet in. They're like, we're going to get this stuff taken care of. And they're over here like, okay, that's all great, but we still got to spin our narrative because we're the news. So we got to talk about, I'm going to say this again, Melania's shoes. We're going to talk about Joel Osteen, the one church out of the however many churches. I mean, it's the Bible Belt. There are thousands of churches in those areas. There are
thousands of churches out there.
And his lack of empathy. Forget that the situation is being dealt with head on. Forget that the resources are there. And I mean, to be honest, from what they're saying is he's handling it a lot quicker, a lot more hands-on than Bush did during Katrina.
Sure. I wouldn't dispute that at all.
And then, of course, there were the memes that I saw. It was kind of funny where some right-wing people that were not informed were basically saying, well, Obama didn't do anything during Katrina. So they were saying like they had a picture of Trump and Obama, and it said, Trump mobilized, quickly responded to the crisis, and then it said over here 2005 Obama, 3 years,
waited 3 years to become president.
Yeah, waited 3 years.
Yeah, I've seen that. That's just ridiculous.
So,
I want to point out on that though. I mean, one of the shining exemplary displays of I don't know what they call them, Houstonians or whatever, the Texans,
right.
Has been their response to the situation. We've been seeing the great unity, the coming together of people and stuff like that to really look out for their neighbor. Yeah, and again, while we're coming in an era where the narrative of race war and all this other kind of crap that's being spun out there, to see people of different ethnic backgrounds and situations coming together to help each other out, just to help their fellow human being.
Right.
I think it's a very positive thing. It should be enhanced. It should be pointed out. It's not being pointed out. I mean, I have seen a couple memes that really did kind of try to highlight that point and stuff like that. But yeah, nothing brings people together, unfortunately, like tragedy, right? At that point, nobody really cares who you are, where you are. You're going to try and save as many people and help as many people as you can. I think that's something that should be called out.
Right. Yeah. So I don't know what else is there about the storm. I mean, we could be totally like the media and just talk more about Melania's shoes.
Melania's shoes, man. That's what
she wore white sneakers into a flooded.
Oh, that's terrible.
Those can get really dirty. So
I mean, the nonsense of people trying to make that an issue. I mean, there's so much bigger things going on, like the North Korea thing.
Yeah.
Right. So like I had a lot of friends, like I'm a trader out here and stuff like that. So I get a lot of people asking me questions like, what do you think about the North Korea and this, that, and the other? And I'm kind of explaining to them, look, this is not going to happen, right? A Marine team of maybe 5 people can go into North Korea and turn off the power for the entire country, right? It's not like they've got a sophisticated redundant system and stuff like that. So the traders are all calling me and stuff like that. And then I look on like Twitter and Facebook, it's fucking Melania's shoes. And I'm like, what the hell? What is going on? I mean, there's such a disconnect. I'm there with my guys and be like, okay, what's the war portfolio going to look like? What Lockheed Martin, aluminum miners, platinum, and I'm looking at fucking fashion news on CNN. It's like these people are so fucking out of touch.
I saw a video this morning of a gentleman. So he's in Japan.
Yeah.
And he's in some hotel, and he's like, basically you see him, he pulls out his camera and he's like, what the fuck's going on? It's 6 a.m, and I'm getting this alert that North Korea launched a missile. Jesus Christ, I'm trying to sleep. And then he's like, okay, well, the sirens are going out. Okay, I'm gonna go back to sleep. And he goes, and then it says 15 minutes later, he wakes up. The fuck? Now they said it's flying over us or something. He goes, I heard last week there was one that like landed off like 100 kilometers off the shore. And he goes, I'm trying to fucking sleep here. It's 6 in the goddamn morning. He goes back to sleep. And then he wakes up again. He's laying in bed and he goes, what the fuck? My TV turned on by itself. And the news is on about this missile launch. And he goes, Jesus Christ, now I got to get up and turn off the TV. I'm trying to fucking sleep.
I mean, that's about as serious as people are taking North Korea.
I mean, this is Japan, and it's like, okay, they launched the missile. It's like, well, they've launched so many duds, though.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Exactly. I mean, so if anything really did happen, right? Okay, yeah, Japan is probably... But I mean, it's going to be a shit show, right?
Like and if they launch, because people are talking about if they do launch something like that, they possibly have like a mini nuclear warhead.
Yeah,
that can give you like a couple, like something that'll take a small city out at least.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, I'm not wishing harm, obviously, upon any nation that's neighboring North Korea, but let's just say they did, and they did hit something. They're going to be wiped out.
They're done.
They're done. I mean, it's like you got the giant and you've got this little guy, and it's like you're gonna poke, you're gonna get punched.
Yeah.
You're gonna get yeah. So it's like
the DMZ in South Korea, which is the barrier between North and South. There's a bunch of mines and stuff like that. It will get plowed through, and there will just be a mass invasion. It will be the end of North Korea. That's it.
Yeah. It just. That would give, and people are afraid, well, Trump's being stupid and he's inciting war with North Korea. It's like, I get like some of his statements are definitely a little bit on the not so cautious side of things, but then again, I look at it and go, but really, I mean, because you probably saw this video that Sargon did when he talked about Jeremy Corbyn and his statements on nuclear warheads.
I don't think I've seen that one.
So Sargon basically talks about like, as a leader, as a national leader, someone who like Jeremy Corbyn wanting to, become prime minister, in the same way with Trump being president. You when you make decisions like as a president, it's difficult because you really have to look at it at like a numbers. You got to look at the numbers. You got to look at the what kind of arsenal you have, and you need to take action. And if North Korea did anything, as horrible as it might sound, if they did anything, he's just going to take him out. He knows the stakes. He knows what needs to be done. People want to go and talk, the needless loss of lives and all this, and it's like that's all very legitimate for us as citizens and of just being people. But as a president, as a world leader, you need to take the steps that you need to take to ensure the lowest loss of life, or just since you got to protect everyone else. So, by saying what he said, probably had some point to it to basically put North Korea in its place. Like, if you do anything, we will take you out.
Yeah. Which is, I mean,
because the rest of the
mutually assured destruction, right? That was what was through the Cold War.
Well, but it's not really even mutual in this point.
Yeah, I mean, a nuclear weapon is a serious, mass murdering device and stuff like that. But just on principle, as a politician, if you get nuked, you have to nuke back, right? To set the precedent that if you're going to do this to us, we are going to do this to you. Right. You need to maintain MAD, which is mutually assured destruction, right? So all of the bleeding hearts or needless loss of life and stuff like that, that's all true. but the politics of nuclear proliferation negates that and says you need to be able to be willing to risk all of their population as well.
Right. They need to know that
you're willing to push the button.
Right. And because that will, in the end, in the bigger picture, would actually save the most lives.
Correct. So let's say something terrible happens, and all right, let's say the West Coast, California gets hit, right? Los Angeles, right? 10 million people, whatever the case is, right? North Korea does that, right? If you respond with diplomacy and sanctions, guess who you embolden to do it anyway, right? All of the enemies of North Korea could do it again. Iran, possibly if they get a weapon, every possible nuclear target is basically going to say, well, it's free open season on the US. So just on that principle, you got to be like, all right, if you hit us with one, we'll hit you with 10. That's it.
Yeah.
And that's what you need, unfortunately, because we have these weapons in existence. That's what's required.
Did you know during the Korean War, nuclear was actually an option on the table?
Yeah, of course. Of course.
During the Korean War, yeah, General MacArthur actually suggested that we nuked North Korea.
Yeah, I've heard that story.
Yeah, I've seen like people trying to basically discuss what would happen if we actually did, and how things would be different today. But yeah, that's just one of those things that, like you said, the bleeding hearts have a hard time understanding is you cannot give in when it comes to things like that, because you just can't. And I think what Trump did was, the man's a little crazy. I'll give you that.
Unorthodox, yeah. I think you're right.
So by doing what he did and saying what he said, people, I think a certain someone in North Korea just might take that a little seriously and just not move, not dare to shoot anything out. I mean, granted,
correct,
the one they shot over Japan, but I think that just puts him in this place to kind of, maybe it doesn't stop him completely. Probably not. I mean, if you're a crazy dictator, you're a crazy dictator. But
exactly.
But I think it definitely slows him down a bit. Like, okay, let's think about this.
Yeah, I mean, there's no winning scenario for him to do that, right? If he wants to maintain in his little despot piece of the world, and I mean, China wants him there, right? Because he serves as a buffer between communist China and very pro USA, pro Western South Korea.
Yep.
So they're propping him up, right? The Chinese are propping him up, and they don't really see him as anything serious. But if he does that, there's no more kingdom. There's nothing, right? There's nothing in his capacity that will warrant, actually doing that. There's no winning scenario for that regime. Right. So that's why I'm not particularly worried. The markets aren't particularly worried. I mean, the Japanese apparently aren't particularly worried. But yeah, that's what's going on.
It's fucking 6 a.m. North Korea shooting missiles over us. What the fuck? I'm trying to sleep.
Fuck's sake. You gotta get that clip, man. You gotta put that for the
unfortunately, it's an American guy. I think it's an American or British guy, but he's a tourist, and he's just like, fuck's sake, I'm trying to sleep.
Yeah, that's pretty crazy. I mean, that's the world we live in now. Where this situation changes, and this is what got Sam Harris in a lot of trouble. When you deal with a regime where they don't mind being martyred, such as some of the Islamic countries. So if the Islamic countries get hold of nuclear technology and their whole society is basically, deaf and, let's get our virgins sort of thing, they're more dangerous. That's a lot more serious than anything North Korea is going to do, because they don't care if they wipe out a portion of their population. And that's the difference.
Sounds like a certain World War II Japan.
yeah, it's pretty messed up.
Yeah.
But yeah, that is a scenario to worry about. So if Iran got a nuclear weapon, and there's an arms race in the Middle East, because if Iran gets it, Saudi Arabia's got to get it. Everybody's got to like arm themselves, etc., etc. That is a scary scenario.
Hell, if ISIS got a nuke.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, that's what you're dealing with, right? These people are willing to kill themselves in order to, get into heaven and all that whole jazz. So being killed in the jihad, it's honorable. So they don't really necessarily mind as long as they get to strike first, and if something comes back and destroys that, they're not going to care.
Right.
So yeah, that's a scary scenario.
Oh, so an e-cigarette exploded, right?
We're talking about the Eustis Station disaster of an e-cigarette that exploded and left some smoke and basically shut down the station.
Yeah. Because
I think something else happened at one of the airports. I can't remember. Similar thing.
Because with all the shit going on in Europe with all these attacks, which are, a lot of them are totally legitimate. Like there's actual attacks going on. I'm actually kind of concerned myself just with all the refugees, and the sort of ISIS is basically infiltrating countries, and there's just hotspots and just stuff's going on all the time. Well, so Brook posted this article about basically how this was a train station. Some smoke appeared.
Train station, subway station,
and someone and then they heard an explosion, and they thought it was like a bomb. And I mean, right after Brook posted it, I immediately was like, "Fuck, another attack!" And then within hours, Brook sends me back again, and he goes, "Oh yeah, it was actually an e-cigarette that exploded." and it's, I think, definitely, yeah, it's a bad thing overall, but I think it just goes to show, like, even for me, I don't know how, I'm not speaking on behalf of anyone else, just for me, this is becoming too normal. In the EU. I mean, you've got all these nations where you're just letting them all in. I mean, there's plenty of stuff even that you don't hear about. Like Brook, about like the acid attacks. You said there's like stabbings that take place at random times.
Yeah, all over London.
It's not just the trucks and the plowing and stuff you hear about anymore. It's also just the little incidents here and there that just people aren't talking about, and for fear that there's racism.
Correct. Or Islamophobia or whatever.
All those trigger words. Buzzwords, yeah. And just, it's, and I think I told you last week about how this rabbi in Barcelona was calling for all of the Jews in Western Europe to retreat to Israel.
That's right.
Saying Europe is lost. It's like, the fuck?
Yeah.
I mean,
there are a lot of people who feel that way.
So, I mean, what do you do at this point?
I mean, this is going to be controversial, but I mean, that is part of the reason that I came out to the UK, right? When I was in Trinidad and Tobago, I was watching a lot of this stuff happen, but I'm not in it, right? And there's a kind of unspoken racism and stuff like that that's back in my home country. So if I start speaking out for Western values, it would not have played very well for me back home. Now, even though I'm not speaking about it in a racist context, I'm just talking about ideas. So Islam is an idea; it's an ideology.
Right.
Western values of liberalism, democracy, freedom, individual, and stuff. These are ideas that have helped, propel Western civilization and pretty much most of the colonial world to modern status, etc. But it doesn't matter with these people. Everything is racist, everything is sexist, everything is whatever, Islamophobia or whatever the case is. So coming out to the UK has given me license to actually start to share my ideas about this. And the one thing that is not happening, I mean, the whole irony of the Eustis Station, and it's a controversial point. It's e-cigarette stuff like that, shut down the station. The police were ready to respond for that scenario, which is great. And I commend the Metropolitan Police and the London Police and stuff like that for doing a good job. However, they're not dealing with the preventative side, right? We have a lot of extremist groups and stuff like that, and ISIS fighters and other things that have come back to the country that are basically roaming around, right? We have like known terrorists and stuff like that clogging up our jails, and they're preaching, extreme Wahhabi Islam and recruiting people in the prisons, and it's becoming an epidemic, right? Now, unless you're going to deal with reality, the facts, right? You're not really interested in solving this thing. And the fact is, you need to address the ideology. Now, part of that, but of course, the politicians have the will to do that, right? There's a lot of money that comes in from the Saudis and other Islamic
political suicide.
Yeah, and there are huge Muslim communities out here. If you start speaking out against these things, you're not getting reelected, etc., etc. So we're in a very dangerous cycle. But you need to weaponize the Christians. You need to weaponize the other groups, and you need to start getting, open up the immigration to like pastors, evangelists, and all kind. You need to start getting people to challenge these ideas. But instead, and this goes back to the Eustis Station and the police forces. Instead, they've gone the route of censorship. So anybody who criticizes Islam online, or anybody who speaks against, the concerns of their neighborhood, or whatever the case might be, they get the visit from the police, right? They get questioned or censored, or their accounts are frozen, or whatever the case might be. And this is the hypocrisy, where if we're not allowed to deal with these things in the realm of the marketplace of ideas, and challenge the ideology, right? And actually speak against the ideas that caused this in the fucking first place, what are you left with? You're basically telling us that we have to take it. And they're very quick to respond to the incident, which is great. I'm not faulting the police for doing that, but they're not really helping us in terms of actually addressing the ideology that's causing this problem, which requires free speech. Like I say, I think we should weaponize Christians. I think every Christian out there should start to share their faith, start to, have a platform and stuff like that. As much as people might have problems with that and stuff like that, I think it needs to happen. I think we need to start importing preachers, right, and all this other kind of stuff to challenge these ideas. National debates on the BBC, let the atheists jump on this too, right? The atheists and the Christians actually have an aligned interest in preserving Western civilization in this scenario.
Right.
Yeah, so they're not helping the police, the government, the police, and others are not helping us in that respect. And I, for one, I believe the message that I used to preach, which was one of inclusion, of love, forgiveness, grace, acceptance by God and stuff like that. I think I'm out here. Part of the reason I'm out here is actually to get people out here to get that message, to share it, and hopefully change some hearts and minds. Now that, again, yes, a lot of these migrants are coming in here, and because Europe is mostly secularized, you basically would not have the Americans. I mean, Americans are very religious and spiritual people, not so much out here. You have to get those traditions back in place. You need to re-energize like the Church of England, the Catholics, and these other kinds of things, and really celebrate it. So for one of two reasons: either they get disgusted and they leave, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or you win them over. But you need to have those discussion of ideas, and that's why the police cracking down on crap on Twitter and all this other nonsense is only adding to the problem. And actually, that's another video that I want to do. I might actually pull this little rant that I've done here and make that as a clip for for my channel. But it's what has to be. If you're not going to tackle the ideology, it's pointless. You're just the flood is coming, and you're there with an umbrella, but you're not really dealing with the issue. So yeah, that's what has to happen.
It's funny how we're talking about floods again.
It's true.
What we really should be talking about Melania's shoes.
Melania's fucking shoes, man.
We're really going to name it that.
You guys have escaped. I mean, the Americans have really, escaped, which is why it's so important that you have the free speech. Like when I went to the Libertarian meetup out here in London, and it's a small group, maybe 30 people showed up, kind of rotating. Some came, some left, and stuff like that. we discussed a lot of the principles of liberty, freedom, the migrant crisis, and other things, and it became a discussion about things like gun rights, issues pertaining to free speech, the marketplace of idea, individualism, and all this other kinds of stuff, Western democracy, all that good stuff. And it's ironic that these are the discussions that we're having now in the UK that were codified in your US Constitution 200 plus years ago.
Right.
Right. It is absolutely amazing that the founding fathers of America had that foresight to see what tyranny looked like in Europe. And that's the problem out here, is that we've gone through periods of tyranny, right? Well, I can't say we, because I've only been here for 6 months. But Europe in general seems to be somewhat okay with curtailing freedom and liberty and Western values, for, not to be called racist. And that's the biggest problem.
Right. So I'm looking here, because you were talking about free speech. Have you heard about this?
What's that, man?
Okay, let's see here. The UN
is
is
the UN
actually...
thing. Yes,
Yeah.
I knew you were going to pull that up. Good job, Amos.
The U.S. is one of only 3 countries opposing the UN resolution that restricts free speech in order to fight Nazis or something.
Where are you reading this from? Make sure.
Oh, this was the Canada Free Press, but then I looked at, there was one called Life Zet. Some of the more recent ones. Yeah, so basically, for those that you guys can Google it and look at, I would recommend cross-referencing. But some articles I'm seeing that are popping up is basically saying that due to the events in Charlottesville and the Nazism and white supremacy on the rise, or just I see it as it's not on the rise. It's more so on the how would you say it? Because we're so informed nowadays, you will hear about everything that happens. And if a white supremacy group comes up and it's being thrown out there and it's being essentially the news is being projected out there, everyone's going to think it's on the rise. So the UN has basically issued concerns and saying that the US should temporarily suppress freedom of speech as a way to combat white supremacy, Nazism, KKK, all of that, all those things. And that's a bunch of bullshit, isn't it?
Yeah.
And
yeah.
because which goes to show, I think, is really interesting, is that we're really one of the few countries in the world that have the degree of free speech that we have. Which, on one hand, I think is a great thing. On the other hand, it just fucks with everyone else, because they're like, holy shit, you guys get to say literally just about whatever you want. Our Supreme Court is very strict on debating, on really debating and sort of constant, time and time again. For as much as a lot of our media, a lot of our society is becoming very regressive, our government is still very strong in the point that freedom of speech is still there's a good reason why it's our First Amendment.
Correct.
The freedom. You see the First and Second Amendment as means that it prevents the government as sort of stopgap measures. Well, I shouldn't say they're measures to prevent a tyrannical government. You have freedom of speech, so we can always speak out and criticize our government and criticize ideas and criticize people and just speak in general. And the Second Amendment, that gives us an equalizer in preventing a tyrannical government from rendering its citizens defenseless against possible tyranny. So, yeah, I remember I saw this somewhere and I thought that can't be true, because the UN was kind of started by us in some ways.
Yeah, it was right after the war.
We kind of started it, and UN panel urges U.S. to unconditionally reject racist hate speech. And see, this is the thing. Huh?
No. I mean, yeah. Well, we'll finish your point. Then I'll tell you. I'll tell you how free speech is interpreted in the UK, and you'll see the difference.
Right. So, so then here's where we're coming up with this whole hate speech thing again. What is hate speech? Well, the Supreme Court has never. I mean, as much as the UN is sort of this kumbaya, happy little organization that we took part in establishing. Now they're urging us to abandon, which I think is the Constitution which is above the UN's wishes, to basically tell us, hey, shut out some free speech for the sake of the rest of us, because we got to fight this racism, hate speech. And it's like and that's what's interesting. It's all in the speech part.
Correct.
It's not actually. They're not saying
changing anybody's mind. They just want to shut them up, right?
They just want to shut them up. So, which is interesting. It's like, should we have a domestic terrorist, a domestic anti-terrorist organization that finds KKK members and arrest them for any violence that they do, or are they just telling us throw away your freedom of free speech for the time being?
Yeah,
which I think is so much worse.
That's the whole thing. It always starts with terrorism, right? So the Patriot Act in the United States was an attempt to gather intelligence and unite different agencies for the sake of monitoring terrorism, domestic and abroad. And there was the whole fallout from Edward Snowden and Julia Assange with WikiLeaks and stuff like that. And basically the surveillance had turned inwards upon the United States, where once upon a time there was the habeas corpus, you needed grounds to get like a wiretap or anything like that. That's kind of been thrown out. So you've lost the right to privacy in a sense. Mm-hmm. So there's always a cry. So what was originally terrorism, of like foreign terrorism, has now become mass surveillance, right?
Right.
But that's always it. That's always it. So even the whole thing about curtailing free speech, right? YouTube is trying to curtail hate speech and dissenting opinions or whatever the case might be. Now, I'm not completely convinced of the narrative that it's only like alternative media, because I know a couple of gaming channels that have been hit by the bots and demonetized and stuff like that. I had a religious channel that got hit. So I'm not fully on board with this idea that it's a conspiracy. I think the algorithm, as usual, is malfunctioning. And again, there's no context. Again, the left's idea is once you say a racist word, you're a racist, when there's a context that, it's a nuance. You can't really get into that, right? Which is the whole point of comedy and other things, right? But anyway, so it starts with that, saying like, yeah, we want to curtail hate speech, but then all of these other things fall into that category. Which brings me to what I wanted to kind of touch on with this whole thing, right? There was a petition in the UK not long ago to codify the laws of free speech, much like your First Amendment, out here in the UK. Like, they wanted to pass a law in writing that, look, this is protected speech. Now, again, showing how the UK politicians don't have any clue as to what they're actually doing, the proposition achieved the number of signatures that were required to present a debate within Parliament on the issue. Like, you need at least 100,000 or maybe 10,000 or whatever it is, and they have to debate the topic.
Kind of like what we have here.
Right, yeah, you have like referendums and stuff like that you could actually, get campaigns that will take, into debates and committees and stuff like that. But this was shot down, right? The response from the parliamentary office was basically, well, the UK already has a free speech provision in the European Convention on Human Rights. Now, let me just kind of highlight the European Convention on Human Rights a little bit, right?
Ooh.
So this is a fundamental right. Freedom of expression, extremely important. In Britain, you have the right to express yourself without persecution from others. This is not the case in all countries, etc., right? But here's where it gets interesting. They add in this clause about the responsibility of free speech. And they point out that there are exceptions to free speech. And these are, there are other exceptions to the right of free speech, which are restricted on the grounds of, one, national security. So we cannot have a WikiLeaks, so somebody cannot inform on the government. The other exception includes restrictions on the grounds of public safety, the protection of health, morals, and the restriction to prevent crime and disorder. Right? Morals are completely subjective, right? You're basically saying that you can curtail my free speech on the sake of morals. It doesn't end there. Another restriction is the disclosure of information that has been received in confidence in another person's expectation. So if somebody tells you a secret in confidence and you share it, that's a violation of free speech laws. And lastly, the main exception to the right of free speech and expressions are that expressions do not engage in harm or endanger other people. Those are the restrictions on free speech in the UK. Basically, you cannot insult anyone, you cannot criticize anyone, you cannot harm them emotionally, you cannot offend their moral sensibilities, you cannot share or leak upon the government that might be doing something heinous behind your back. And if you share somebody's secret, you could be fucking arrested. And they call that free speech in the UK. Now, I signed the petition. Right, I actually believe, I think we need a constitution because the parliament out here is just running rickshaw over everybody's private rights, personal rights. And this idea that free speech is only for speech that you like is bullshit, right? If you did not have a provision, you know, for people to speak out in communist Russia and other times and stuff like that, that was censored speech. Like speaking about pro-capitalist stuff was illegal. You could not read like certain books like Adam Smith's Wealth of Nations, The Road to Serfdom, and these other types of books. Those were like blacklisted, but those are the things, those were the foundational things, the understanding of the individual and stuff like that was needed. Now, if you take it that everything has to fit in line with this great, whatever, great society narrative that, you know, the parliament is putting out, and you're not allowed to speak against that, for having your right to free speech revoked, that's not free speech.
Right.
So that's, you speak what we tell you to say.
So here's CBS News. They're basically saying a top UN body on racial discrimination has taken the unusual step of urging the U.S. to unequivocally and unconditionally reject racist hate speech and crimes after a far-right rally in Charlottesville, Virginia. Its chairwoman called for President Trump to take the lead. The Committee on the Elimination of Racial Discrimination. Wow, that's
ridiculous. It's time to defund the UN. The UN is a waste of taxpayers' money.
Pointed Wednesday in a statement that didn't explicitly mention Mr. Trump to failure at the highest political level to unequivocally reject racist, violent events. See, I like how vague they are.
Yeah, that could be anything.
Yeah, the vagueness, the broad strokes they make. But in an interview, committee chairwoman said Trump should take the lead in speaking out. What else did they say? On Tuesday, Trump blamed the media for the widespread condemnation of his response to violence. Link to the which included an observation that many sides were to blame. He told supporters in Phoenix that he openly called for healing, unity, and love in an immediate aftermath of the tragedy, and had simply been misrepresented in news coverage. And then again, it's just the committee acted under its early warning and urgent action procedures that have been applied only 20 times since 2003 against countries including Iraq, Burundi, Guyana, and Israel. The U.S. has previously called to respond in 2006 over the treatment of a group of Native Americans, the Shoshone. I'll be posting this article in the description, by the way. Yeah. And see, this is what concerns me is they're not talking about the response of the police that were there.
Right. They're not addressing the security issues.
They're not addressing security issues. They're not addressing all these other things that would have prevented this from happening. They're addressing speech.
Straight to free speech. Yeah, exactly.
Straight to the freedom of it. So it's like, it's like if I went into, I mean, this could be any other context, which I think could be a lot worse. Let's say I went into Washington, D.C. and held a peaceful rally saying lower taxes.
Yeah.
And
it was called the Tea Party.
Right. So I went there and I had a peaceful protest of about, let's say, 100 people. And we're speaking about we want lower taxes. And let's say another group of liberals, let's just say Antifa for this, and then they came out and said we want high taxes because free college, free this, free that, free everything, and they attacked us. And now we just shut out. Now we just say, screw it.
Nobody can talk. Yeah, nobody has the right to protest.
Screw it. Now everyone can talk.
Yeah, that's not solving anything, right?
That's
the freedom to speak.
Instead of the fact that
fundamental right.
Instead of addressing the issue that we were protesting there and no police were out there to defend us.
Correct.
Because
instead
the
of
police
actually addressing the problems.
Do you know what branch of the government the police are kind of under, pretty much?
Well, it's local government. It's not usually.
But I mean, if you looked at the three, like, because even on multiple levels of local government, there's still three branches to a degree.
Sure.
You have the mayor, you have the city council, and then you have police. I'd say. I've heard the police are likened to the judicial branch of government.
Right. So I mean, for people who don't know, this is Charles, I think it's Montesquieu's division of powers. So there's the executive, the legislature, and the judiciary. So yeah, they would fall under the judiciary or the enforcement side of it. So yeah, I get that. So the governor's one thing.
Defend free speech.
Yeah.
Defend the free speech of this. We'll just say they're like Tea Party members, protesting for low taxes.
Yeah.
They're not defending it. If anything, they're enabling and allowing.
Correct.
The constitutional, rights to be infringed upon, which is exactly what happened in Charlottesville, where the mayor and the city basically gave these white nationalists, white supremacists, the right to protest peacefully in this park.
Yeah.
And the police did nothing.
Right. They didn't separate the crowds. They didn't, I mean, it was rumored that orders came down to allow to stand down with the police and not do their job and stuff like that. But you're absolutely right. But again, they want to treat, again, it's politically motivated, right? There's no political gain for having people, tell the police to do their fucking job, right?
Right.
But for dissenting opinions, especially with the unpopular thing of the globalist movement and, unpopular policy out of the UN and elsewhere, where people are receiving a lot of criticism and, career politicians, the one thing that they detest is free speech, because everybody gets to criticize everything that they do. So that's the one thing that they want to take from everybody. And I mean, fascist Italy, communist Russia, Nazi Germany. The first thing that's cracked down is the universities, the publications, and they start to control the narrative. And free speech is the first thing that goes. And you have to
so interesting how the founding fathers knew that.
It's amazing. It really is. It really is amazing when you consider, they came through it. They came through, they taught the lessons of history of what happened to the Roman Empire, what happened to the Prussian Empire, to all the different empires that have come and gone, from the Mongolians to the Ottoman Empire, and they've seen it over and over. Europe is the most warred continent on the planet. They have thousands of years of history to draw upon during the Enlightenment, and they realize that it all hinged on free speech. But we can't even recognize that now, right?
We're like, hate speech is not free speech, and incitement, and
because they want you to stop speaking. And you just think about it logically. Okay, so let's say, all right, you ban Richard Spencer, you ban the KKK from speaking, right? They're not allowed to be on Twitter or YouTube, whatever, right? So they're totally alienated. Is that going to change a Richard Spencer or a KKK member?
No.
No, it's not. You're not addressing the ideology, which is the same thing that's going on here. Right. So we have the threat of Islam coming in, and we're told we can't talk about it. We can't talk about what our concerns about what this is, how it's changing the Western civilization, right? And silencing me and other people who might have concerns, like legitimate concerns about the mass immigration stuff, is not going to change anything unless you're allowed to debate the ideas.
Right.
So yeah, that's where we're at.
You know, at least we have the freedom of speech to talk about Melania's shoes.
Yeah, the media loves Melania's shoes, man. My goodness, that's crazy.
Yeah, they're like, yeah, you can have all that free speech. We'll just, you know.
Yeah, they don't care. They don't care if you're a drugged out teenager, getting high, going to the clubs, promiscuous sex, out of wedlock births, whatever. Yeah, that's fine. As long as you don't think for yourself and you don't question too much, they'll let you be. You could do what you want.
Hey, but don't talk about it though. You can't talk about that.
Yeah. Don't post anything on Twitter other than the Wilshire police will show up at your door and arrest you, man. It's just crazy.
Can't talk about anything.
Yeah.
So I mean that's really the big thing. I mean, we're talking about all this other stuff, and it's funny how it's still all coming back to speech,
free speech.
Yeah, and it's real concerning to see that the UN is, because I always thought like, okay, the UN had to be, being we took part in founding it, they had to have had a lot of their ideals, a lot of the principles would have been instilled by our Constitution, like, hey, you know, freedom of speech, human rights, you know, egalitarianism, all this stuff. Fuck all that.
It has no constitution, right? The UN is a political body. It's not a government.
It's got a charter or something, doesn't it?
Yeah, it has a charter, right, to address the issues of humanity. So like starvation, disease, you know, it's accomplished nothing. It's basically a retirement home for aging politicians and bureaucrats. Pretty much the EU. So after people have served in Congress, and you know, not the senators and stuff like that, because they get these nice big fat pensions, but like the staff of the politicians and stuff like that, once they've served their term, they get very nice cushy jobs at the United Nations, right? That's their reward, right? So it's similar to us out here in the UK. So for instance, Tony Blair is threatening, you know, he's trying to derail the Brexit vote from the inside, and he's trying to work with Junta and the EU, you know, Parliament to try and put an end to Brexit. Why? Because Brexit is his retirement, right? The EU is his retirement. If we break ties with the EU, he doesn't get a nice consulting job. He doesn't get all the perks and the free travel and free Viagra and all this other crap that these bureaucrats get.
Right.
So they're looking out for themselves, which is why also our politicians are dragging their feet on this thing, because they really are cutting off their retirement.
Right.
But again, it shows the importance of the Brexit vote. If it is that we want politicians that serve our interests, the interests of the people, and they're not padding their own retirement to give them a European interest that's not necessarily aligned with the people, Brexit has to happen. Europe has got to go. Right. Yeah, that's a discussion for another time, man.
Yeah, but we're kind of coming up on our time here.
And you didn't even disconnect once, Amos. I'm so proud of you.
Thank my internet provider. So basically, I guess, I don't know. Some concluding thoughts on the matter is that I think we're coming up to a very interesting time. It's interesting to see that how the U.S. is only one of 3 countries that is opposing this free speech thing, which I probably got to look up who is the other 2 countries.
I would be surprised if it was like some Eastern Bloc countries like Czech and Poland or something like that. Maybe Switzerland. I don't think Switzerland's in the United Nations. I'm not sure.
They're neutral as fuck.
Yeah. Because they can afford to be. They don't really care. Their entire country is a fortress, right?
Right. But it's just it's pretty concerning lately that like how free speech is. I I'm about 95% sure that in terms of our government, the Supreme Court, like the system in place will keep free speech alive, no matter how strongly the de facto push is to suppress free speech, suppress hate speech, and all this stuff. That we should be okay, but I mean, it's 95% sure.
Yeah,
There's that
yeah,
5% chance, right? And it's just it's interesting how, and we've talked about this too, Brooke and I. We kind of mentioned how are we going down just a completely new path altogether, or is just this? If you look at Hegel's dialectic, how things kind of get worse before they get better. When you look at human history, is this just one of those cycles we're going through, or is this a genuine concern? Brooke thinks it's gonna be a cycle. We'll be fine in a few years, but I'm the younger guy, so I'm definitely concerned. But it's definitely interesting.
Yeah, I've seen it. I remember the days of the Y2K, early millennial. The doomsday scenario was the computers were going to hit the year 2000. We're all going to be fucked. Right?
That's computers, though. I mean, we're talking about.
I've seen from one. I've heard from one fearmongering to the next thing, to the next thing, to the next thing. Right. So 1995, inconvenient truth. By 2015, there are going to be no more glaciers. New York is going to be underwater. I've heard all of this kind of stuff before, and the truth is, a lot of it doesn't happen. It has become a reality. The migration thing, terrorism has become a living reality in the last probably 15 to 20 years. But before that, before 2001, with the World Trade Center, you never used to hear about terrorism, right? I mean, yeah, the UK had the IRA and stuff like that, but I mean, they were fighting for land. It wasn't like a religiously motivated sort of thing, right?
Yeah.
You didn't hear about these kinds of things, but things are shifting in that regard. That I'm concerned about, but not every doomsday scenario necessarily plays out in a bad way. Most of it never happens.
You've got the migrant crisis in Europe. You've got the free speech concern.
The attack on free speech.
The attack on free speech in the U.S. I mean,
yeah, that's serious.
Because if it hit anywhere else, it probably would just be kind of whatever. But it's hitting here, which, like we saw in that article, one of the 3 nations that is opposing these free speech pushes against it, from the UN, and it's definitely a concerning to think about how. I mean, first we're kind of like, okay, the government's watching all of us all the time. Not cool, but we'll live with it, kind of. I mean, I'm kind of in a place where it's like, whatever. I mean, a lot of us kind of figured they were watching us anyways. Exactly. Now it's like, okay, now they want to make sure we can't. Like, now that they're watching us, they want us to not say certain things, not think certain things.
Correct.
And the society is slowly sort of like, going in that direction with a lot of people. But again, you hear about how my generation and the generations that are coming after me are going to be more conservative.
Yeah. Hopefully.
The information, the overwhelming availability of information can not only inform those to be anti-free speech, but I think equally become pro-free speech.
Let's hope so.
On one hand, we're thinking it's the end of the world. We had to suppress free speech because of all this hate and stuff. But on the other hand, we're seeing, well, that may be true, but that flow of information has to be allowed to happen in order for us to be informed.
Correct.
To have our ideas challenged, but also, be informed and have our
you need to attack. People do bad things because of bad ideas. So we need always to be able to discuss, debate, debunk bad ideas.
Yeah.
And that requires, sometimes the bad idea might go against a huge portion of the public consciousness. Right? I mean, as I say, especially around the issues of politics, migration, and these other things, You need to be able to criticize these things, and otherwise, you're just going to continue to have people doing bad things, and it's going to go unchecked.
Right.
Yeah. So you're right.
Yep. Well, that'll be it for us today.
Awesome, man. Is that time already? Excellent.
So yeah, Brooke and I, follow Brooke and I on social media. Subscribe to my channel as well as Brooke's channel, even though he has more subscribers. I got to do more videos. Check out Brooke's videos. He does a lot more lifestyle stuff, but he'll do some political stuff. I personally like to do more political videos when I do them. Yeah, follow us on Twitter as well, so you can talk to us about anything you guys want us to talk about, or just we could have discussions. So thanks for watching today, guys. From me here, Amos in Minnesota, and from
Brooke out
Brooke
here in the UK. Thanks for watching, guys.
Have a good day, guys.